It is time for our next installment in my year with Edith Wharton, and this time we will be discussing The Reef. So let's get into it. Hello, book friends, and welcome back to the channel. Hello, if you're new. We have been making our way through all the books that I've read this year with my little reading Edith Wharton year-long reading project. And this time we're going to be talking about a little novel called The Reef, which is a very interesting novel in the biographical history of Edith Wharton and her life and some of the things that she was perhaps processing while writing this. But anyway, I've said this in the last couple videos, but I've discussed these books at length over on Substack. So I'm not going to go crazy in depth in these video reviews, but I just kind of want to make a little teaser, a little something to get you interested in reading Wharton or reading any of these specific Wharton novels if you haven't read them yet. So with all of that being said, let's talk a little bit about what The Reef is about before we do a little discussion. So The Reef is split into a few books, and we get a couple different perspectives as we go through. So in book one, we meet George Darrow, who is a diplomat. He is supposed to be going from London or from the UK to France to see his lover, fiance, Alyssa, who is somebody that he knew in his youth that he did not end up marrying. She ended up marrying somebody else, and she's now a widow, and they can be together. So Darrow is supposed to be heading across the channel to see her, but he gets this letter that says from Anna is asking him to wait. He's got to wait a little bit. She's dealing with some stuff. Don't come right now. And he's not exactly pleased, and he's trying to figure out if he's going to continue on and at least just go to France and do his own thing, or if he is going to do something else. And it's rainy and dreary, and it's not the best place. And while he's trying to figure all this out, he ends up bumping into this young lady named Sophie Viner. It's important to know that all the people in this story, despite being not in America, are all American expats in some way. They are all living in Europe or the UK. Just important to keep in mind because she's still basically only writing American characters. So anyway, so he runs into this young lady named Sophie Viner, and at first he doesn't quite place her, but she knows who he is. And they eventually figure out that she has been working with this woman who owns what I can only describe as like a hotel kind of situation where there's different people there. And she has actually left that place. They ran into each other there in the hallway months ago or something like that. And she is young and sort of fresh and uncomplicated. And he gets to talking to Sophie and why she's going to France and what her plans are and all of this. And he decides to go over with her. She is just so different, so independent, so filled with a zest for life that it's infectious to him. And he ends up taking her around Paris. So they both go to Paris. They are sharing a wall, and I think there may even be a door between their rooms and their hotel. Sophie is intending to go into theater, but first she has to meet these friends of hers who are going to help her find work while she's in France. She doesn't quite get there for a few days because she spends some days in Paris with George Darrow. They have a bit of an affair. They go to the opera. They happen to run into the stepson of Alyssa, who is named Owen. Darrow's a bit worried that Owen may see that he is with a young lady, but he thinks he gets away with it because Sophie is off somewhere else at the time. But this whirlwind kind of Paris romance comes to an end. Darrow is constantly comparing her to Anna, this idealized woman. As much as he may be like sexually interested in Sophie, he's not emotionally interested in her. But Sophie is young and vulnerable, and we need to keep that in mind as the story continues. But eventually they do part, and we move on to the next section of the story. And that's when we move to Gevrey, which is the house that is really Owen's, but where Owen and Anna and their grandmother live, or Owen's grandmother lives with them. And we get to see Anna's perspective. And Anna is like a woman in love. She is just, it is beautiful. It's autumnal day and it's sunshine and everything's wonderful. It's a total contrast to the last part. And she's just waiting for George to arrive. And she's so excited to have George arrive. And eventually he does get there. He meets everybody in the household, including Anna's daughter. And then one day he meets this governess that everybody has been talking about and telling him how much they really enjoy the governess they found for Anna's daughter. And it turns out that the governess is Sophie Viner. So now we are all in all of our players are in the same house. Oh, and to make things more complicated, Sophie Viner is secretly engaged to Owen Leith, which Anna knows, and eventually Darrow knows, and everybody is trying to figure out how to tell Grandma that he is engaged to this governess, which is not exactly a suitable match for Owen. So you have these four people in a house. Darrow and Sophie know that they've had an affair. Anna and Owen don't. George, Darrow, and Sophie keep ending up alone together in these tete-a-tetes. And eventually Owen kind of is watching and finds them suspicious. Eventually things come to light and Sophie breaks things off with Owen and runs away to Paris. Owen follows her, Anna follows her, and it just all starts to fall apart for both sets of lovers. Sophie kind of gets lost to the world. She has this sister who I think she's like an actress. Well, she's like a singer or something. She's this bohemian kind of person. Anna goes to try to find Sophie because she needs to talk to Sophie. And she needs to talk to Sophie because Anna cannot process that this man that she's held on a pedestal has had this affair. She's not exactly mad at Sophie, but she is mad at her lack of understanding of men and of the world and how she was raised in this very insular New York society. She was not made aware of the way that men have affairs, and she starts questioning her former husband. She starts questioning everything, and it becomes this thing that she feels only Sophie can explain to her. So she goes off in search of Sophie. She's trying to get her to somehow make her feel better about going ahead with her marriage with George Darrow, or not going ahead with her marriage with George Darrow. And she follows her to her sister's hotel room, and Sophie has already left to go off to her next employment far away. And Anna is left in the room with this woman who is the exact opposite of Sophie. She's not refined in any way. She's not moral in any way. She's this brash bohemian, sexualized woman. And the story kind of ends. I skipped a lot of things in here because I don't want to tell you everything about the story, but we don't really, I don't feel, get a good resolution. So I would love to know, if you have read this, what you think happens at the end. How do you think this resolves itself? Does Anna choose George or does she not? But I think that gives you a decent framework of what happens in this story for us to be able to do a little bit of discussion of some of the themes and things that Wharton is tackling in this novel. So I think one of the most interesting things about The Reef is that we never really get to see Sophie Viner's perspective. She's always being talked about or spoken for or being quoted by a different perspective. And we don't really know how she feels. She is very much, it seems, in love with George Darrow. She falls for him in this, romantic, after this romantic, affair in Paris. She does fall for him. And she's a decent and moral enough human being to know that she can't really marry Owen and have Darrow as her stepfather-in-law, or give her heart to Owen when she knows that it's already been given to Darrow. And so she removes herself from this family, presumably to allow them to all heal and have a better life and maybe find a better life for herself. But we don't really know because we never really get to see her. We always see her through the veil of somebody else, which I just think is very interesting. The other thing I think is really interesting is the way the women are compared to each other and how there isn't really animosity between Sophie and Anna, or Anna doesn't really shame Sophie very much in any way. It is more like Anna is, by knowing Sophie and knowing what happens between Sophie and George Darrow, Anna realizes that even though she's this widow that's been married and has had her eyes presumably open to certain aspects of the world that she didn't know before marriage, she knows so little about how the world works, how men work, how relationships work. And it's all because of her very refined New York upper crust society and the way that they raise women, how they coddle women, how they keep them innocent of certain things. This is going to kind of come up in The Age of Innocence as well, but they made her very unaware of the ways of men and of lovemaking and affairs and all this stuff. But Sophie doesn't have that. Sophie understands the world, and that's kind of why these women are so interesting next to each other and compared to each other. Because Anna is this idealized woman that you put on a pedestal and you admire and you love her and you marry her if you're George Darrow. But Sophie isn't the one that you marry. She is the independent, she's the against the grain, she's the different woman that hasn't been coddled by society, has had her eyes open to the world and the master, like what happens between men and women and the way things really work. And that makes her more of a sexually desirable woman and less of a woman to put on a pedestal in love. She is the whore to Anna's Madonna kind of situation. So it's very interesting to see those comparisons in a novel, in a story where the women aren't really, like, Sophie's not vilified. I didn't feel. It's much more matter of fact. It's like, here is Darrow who seems to hold these ideas, but the two women are just women trying to exist in a world where everything is really just, there's a double standard. So like Darrow can have whatever affairs Darrow wants to have, and that's fine, and it doesn't affect him. But having this affair come out and having people know that she's had this affair makes things harder for Sophie and can only make things harder for Sophie. The only reason why they make anything harder for George Darrow is because Anna wavers. She wavers a lot on whether or not she should continue with this marriage. There's large chunks of the story that are just her going back and forth and waffling. And she does eventually, she's very much trying to figure out what Sophie had with him and if she could ever have that desired sexualized relationship with Darrow. That impassion. There's a passion that Anna, I don't know if Anna knows if she can have, because I don't know if she knows, I don't know if she was ever taught to be a passionate woman. And all of that is very interesting when you think about Wharton is writing this as she has broken up with her lover, Morton Fullerton. Her marriage is basically done, and things have been a very emotional ride for her. She has been both Anna and Sophie in these scenarios. And it's an interesting story when you know that she was working through a lot of the same sorts of feelings and questions by writing this novel. It is also, interestingly, one of her most Jamesian novels. And I do believe she was really kind of writing this as almost like a thank you to Henry James for all of his support during this really tumultuous time in her life. There's in one of my posts, I think there's I included like a great article that talks about the comparisons between Henry James and this novel, and one of his novels in particular, like just the way it's written. If you are into that, I would definitely check out the Substack posts that I'll link in the description. I think there's a lot of just similarities between the Reef and the Age of Innocence. This seems to be a topic, or these seem to be topics that Wharton is coming back to over and over again in her like mid to late writing career. She's often talking about the ways the world limits women, and in different ways the world limits women. In particular, the Reef, when we're looking at Anna, it's very much about how cultured society coddles and isolates women to the point where they don't understand. They're almost like children in a way, so that they can be an adult and they can learn things that much younger women who have been raised in the world instead of in this insular society know, and sort of take for granted that they know. It's a very interesting novel that I think you will enjoy if you really enjoyed The House of Mirth, and if you really enjoyed Age of Innocence. I think that this falls it falls in line with those novels and fits in with them very well. There is no happy ending. I don't think there's ever a happy ending in a Wharton novel, but or at least I haven't found one yet. But there's a lot to dissect in here. There's a lot to look into. There's a lot of interesting stuff that she does with weather and a lot of other things. So I really do highly encourage you to look at the Substack posts, read them. I do in-depth summary and then some discussion at the bottom of every post. And I would love to know your comments in down below if your thoughts and how you felt if you've read The Reef. If you've never read The Reef and you enjoy Wharton, I do highly encourage you to read it. I think I said that 3 times, so I really encourage you to read it. But anyway, I could ramble on about this one for a little bit, and I'm not going to do that because I have 2 other ones I want to get to today for filming. So thank you guys for watching. Like and subscribe, and I'll see you in my next video, whatever it may be, because it's my channel and I can do whatever I want. Bye.